Matty Fresh, how's it going? Good to see you.
Hey,
It's been a whole week, man.
I know, right? It's like I haven't seen you in so long.
Yeah. Are you ready for this episode? Or are you ready
I'm
for a
so
little preview? Yeah.
I'm so excited to talk about this movie, and for everyone out there, we decided to put together a little art show for you guys in honor of this movie.
Yeah, a little show and tell, a little inspiration that we took from this.
I'm excited to see Dylan's, because Dylan, you're a Renaissance man. You're an actor. You're an artist. You can do it all. So I'm very excited to see what you have in store.
I worked very, very hard on mine. It took me a whole 2 hours. So here we go. I call this one my Leonardo da Vinci, if you will. It's an entire tinfoil sculpture of a little baby deer. And it's just tinfoil, nothing else. Just pure tinfoil as a little baby deer. Ignore that little crack right there. There's nothing to see underneath. It's just tinfoil.
Hey, Dyl.
Yeah. You like it?
No. Did you a baby deer and wrap it in tinfoil?
No. Matt. Are you accusing me of Matt? It's just tinfoil. Nothing but tinfoil. I would turn it around the other side, but I only want you to see this side of the profile because it's the other side. I have nothing to hide. Nothing to hide.
All right. Listen. Dylan, this is why you're not in charge of the bits, and why you always play the straight man in our cold opens. I, on the other hand, took it seriously this time.
Okay.
So I've got some art prepared for you. I went to art school, done some drawings.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very excited for you to see what I've come up with. My first one here is a little nature shot. I call it evokes childhood. It makes you remember those good old days, before all the hustle and bustle of having to make shows on the internet. It's called Swing in Apple Tree.
Apple tree. You mean blueberry tree, Matt? I mean they're blue. The apples are.
Well,
blue.
yeah, no, it's art, Dylan. It's there's interpretations, metaphor. I didn't have red. Moving on, I decided to go with do an animal portrait.
Like Leonardo da Vinci back there.
Yes, but good. I'm really into pets, so I decided to do a pet. And here it is. Can you guess the name of this one, Dylan?
Oh, it's an homage to our episode with Carly. That is a cute little cat. That's just an adorable little cat.
That's a dog, Dylan. It's a dog. Look at the tongue sticking out. Okay, this is not going well. You would make a bad art critic.
Yeah.
Dylan, I think you're really going to like this one. This one is a little abstract, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I love that.
Not sure you're going to get it necessarily, but I call this one a ghost fighting a polar bear in a snowstorm.
Ooh, see, I like that one. That one, I've never seen anything like that one. That one's a good one. I think that's the front runner right now.
It's very, very good.
I don't know how you're going to top that, Matt.
Well, I'm about to top it here real quick, Dylan, because this one is a picture of you. Can you guess the title of it?
Is it Dylan Randazzo?
Close. It's called Dylan Randazzo Nude.
Whoa. Okay, let me see. Okay. Okay. All right. Do you want to hold it a little closer? You said it was Dylan Randazzo Nude?
Yeah.
I think you're I think it's a little slight, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. That's why I drew it like this. Because it's a little slight.
All right, moving on. Let's move on.
This last one I'm very proud of. It's all of the great Renaissance artists, all the great you go to a museum, you're gonna see self-portraits. Even people who never did self-portraits, you find little self-portraits in their paintings and stuff.
Yes.
So this one is a self-portrait of me, obviously, because I am the self in question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very, very proud of it. It's not nude; it is fully clothed, but it's.
Oh, okay, all right, okay. I see the beard, the hair, and what are you saying up there in the top right? Are you saying?
It's my favorite. It's my famous catchphrase.
What a story, Mark.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Framewreck Redemption. That's
It's a
right.
surprise redemption.
Surprise redemption. We didn't really advertise this too well ahead of time that it was going to be a redemption, but this is a movie I think we both watched and we both said, you know what, this is a great movie. This is not like a so bad it's good movie. It's not even bad in really any sense. So I think it's schlock, but it is not bad. And we said, you know what, this has got to be a Framewreck redemption, even though there's really not a lot to redeem because it's not necessarily like regarded as a bad movie either. But it is regarded as like kind of just like another schlocky film. It's regarded as, a box office failure. So there are elements to redeem, I would say. But in totality, I would say A Bucket of Blood is pretty well regarded. So we're gonna just kind of hop on that hype train, if you will. Choo choo. Matt, how you doing? Welcome back to Framewreck. Bucket of Blood. Here we go.
I'm doing all right. I know I've been a little laggy, everyone, a little freezy here and there, but I'm gonna try to fix that a little bit. But we're just going to move on. We're going to carry on through our thing, but I'm very excited to talk about this movie. Yeah, you're right. It is a well-regarded movie, and it's not one that is we would traditionally redeem because really it doesn't need a lot of redemption. But as you said, it wasn't great at the box office. It is underseen and under talked about. So we're gonna give this one its due. And plus, it's our last episode in the summer of Corman. Yeah. So we definitely want to spend some time talking about honoring him and talking about one of his great triumphs. Yeah. So
yeah, because this is, I think, at least from what I've seen of his, probably my favorite work of his I've seen. And I think it is one of those that is at least in the top 5 amongst a lot of people who talk about him. But like you said, yeah, it still doesn't feel like it's necessarily got that huge cultural phenomenon in other ways that a lot of other kind of culty horror films have, like House of Haunted Hill from the time, or obviously all the Hitchcock stuff that would come out in like the 40s, 50s, 60s. So it's really exciting to see this film and get to champion it, because I think, I'm going on the record here, I think this is the best movie we've covered on the show in terms of just quality, in terms of like, if I had to rank these films in order of like what is the best to worst, my favorites would definitely be like The Room and Troll 2, but like in terms of best to worst, I think this is our at least in my opinion, our best movie we've ever covered on the show.
I think you're right. I think I agree with you. I think that and if you go to my Letterboxd, you're going to see my review about it, and I'm not looking at it, but just to paraphrase it, it's like, this is, if you want to know what Corman is about, watch this movie. Like, this kind of displays what his whole thing is, because it's campy, it's silly, it's low budget. It's reused set from another movie, and it will be reused in his next movie. But the heart and the attention that he gives to it, even though, and I'll talk about the production here in a minute, this was filmed in 5 days. And he was reluctant to make it. Like, so it's
which I think makes it all the more impressive too, because it's like, a lot of film directors make shitty films in 4 months, and this guy's doing it in 4.5 or 5 days. It's really impressive, the fact that he's able to get something out there that sounds like it doesn't feel as low budget as it is. It is low budget, and it's visibly low budget, I think, especially with some of the props. I mean, you look right behind me, I mean, that's kind of the extent of what you get in this film, but there's also a merit to that too. It kind of puts you in a certain headspace and universe that you can really embrace it. And I think that's where the redemption of it kind of comes from, is the fact that people would probably look at a few frames of this thing and be like, oh, it's so low budget, this is whatever, this is a fun exercise at best, but it really has interesting things to say. And I think even more so now with time, especially in a modern lens, looking at like the modern scope of studio blockbusters and shit, I think there's a really cool meta commentary about art and originality and all that stuff, and greed, that I think is there, that I don't even think people were necessarily grasping at the time, that I think I have really clung on to from just rewatching certain parts of it. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm very excited to talk about it. Well, let's start out with just some production notes here before we get into it. It was written by Charles B. Griffith and directed by our man Roger Corman,
our boy.
It was developed. Corman was basically challenged to shoot a movie on the leftover sets from a movie called Diary of a High School Bride, which he did not direct, but he basically they were telling him to they wanted to make a horror film, and he wasn't interested in making a horror film. But he got with Charles B. Griffith, and Charles B. Griffith was like, "Hey, let's make a comedy," and he wasn't super excited about that either because his quote was, he said he was uneasy about the idea of making a comedy because you have to be good, and we don't have the time or money to be good. Stick to action. But so they decided to make like a hybrid horror comedy, and you know me, I love horror comedy. Horror comedy is one of my favorite subgenres. So
yeah,
they made into this horror comedy, which ended up being what it was. They shot it in 5 days, as I mentioned before, using the set of Diary of a High School Bride. I misspoke earlier. The challenge was to make a horror movie, not to use the set. They used the set to save money. And then his next movie was Little Shop of Horrors, which is also a horror comedy, not the Rick Moranis one, the original that one is based on.
Yeah.
He made that, which also a horror comedy, using the same set. So that set got 3 movies in a row. But originally it was shot under the title The Living Dead. Shot in 5 days. This is not a situation, I think, where I haven't seen anything about where he's like, I mean, you know, like he was with Teenage Caveman, where he's like, I never made a movie called Teenage Caveman. But I will say The Living Dead is probably a better title than the movie. Although Bucket of Blood does evoke a thing, like it is more marketable, and that's probably why they went with it.
Right. Well, yeah, Bucket of Blood is definitely a more intriguing title. You see that versus The Living Dead. You're like, I want to see Bucket of Blood. Like, I want to see what that's about. But I also think there's an expectation. And I actually think in our Discord, go check out the Dyl Pickle Movie Network Discord. We were talking because I was trying to find it, and I found on Prime it's only in color, and I was like, oh, I have to watch it in black and white. That's the way it was intended to be shown and originally filmed. And then Chad had chimed in and been like, well, yeah, like I don't think blood would be interesting in black and white. I think it would only be cool in color. But the whole thing is, this movie doesn't have a lot of blood in it. And I think that's the funniest thing, is it really has nothing to do with blood. I mean, obviously there's, you know, a kind of unspoken thing that there probably is bloodshed, but it doesn't really evolve a lot around blood. I mean, there's one scene where he's kind of wiping blood off the floor after something, but we never see the actual murders. A lot of blood.
There's a titular bucket of blood in a scene I want to talk about later with the dripping. Where he puts a pot under it, which a Dutch oven rather underneath it to catch it, and that's, I guess, the titular bucket. Yeah,
but it's not a big focus, and there's not a lot of blood shed in the film. Is my point. So I think it's really interesting that, like, you know, that this is the title they went with, but I do think it's a more intriguing title to get people in the seats, kind of like how Teenage Caveman is a much more exciting title to get people to see prehistoric Earth. That being said, I don't think this is necessarily a bad title because there is at least some blood, but I definitely think, you know, it could. Living Dead, I think, makes a lot more sense for this story. What the actual theme of it is, you know. And
both titles would have made sense, kind of what they were going for, which like Teenage Caveman, this is only an hour long, like an hour and 5 minutes long. And the idea is like a drive-in movie, a double feature, like a drive-in double feature that you can get the teens to go to and stuff like that. Like that's the idea for the marketing here. Bucket of Blood is definitely a title for that. Both titles really work for that, but Bucket of Blood, like, it's like, oh, I'm going to go see, you know, Bucket of Blood and Diary of a High School Bride.
Yeah, I would say, though, for those getting their expectations up, kind of like Chad in the Discord, and just people who see the title Bucket of Blood and they're like, I'm expecting the elevator from The Shining. You're not getting that. And I think that's just something we need to note, because I don't want people's expectations to be too high to where they're disappointed in what to expect from this film, because it is really good. And I hope people understand that it's great for other reasons, not just its bloodshed. Right. There's a high kill count, but I mean, blood is very seldom seen. So just fair warning. Though I think for some people that's a good thing. Some people don't necessarily want to see all this blood, especially if it's in black and white, and it doesn't have that red effect either, you know.
Right. And if you haven't seen it, if you're watching this and you haven't seen it, pause this, go watch it. In fact, if you're already on YouTube, it's in the public domain now. So go over to pause this, open a new YouTube tab, type in Bucket of Blood, watch it real quick, come back.
Yeah, come back in an hour. Yeah, it's an hour long. It's not a chore at all, and that's the greatest thing about Corman too. And we've talked about how did Corman make so many movies in such a short amount of time? And I think it's because they were all shot super quickly, they were all shot super cheaply, and they were only an hour long, so they were quick stories to tell, which I really like. Which I think is due to the budget and time restraints. I don't think he purposely sought out to make 60-minute films, but he made it work, and that's what's admirable, and that's why we see so many films of his come out during this time.
And unlike Teenage Caveman, which our big complaint was, hey, that's a good two acts of a 3-act movie, where they cut right before the satisfying conclusion. This is a full story. Like this, you get the whole thing, and it's satisfying, and you get an ending that's really, really good too. Like so, it's I really. Going with you mentioned the black and white and color, and we're having a little discussion. If you go into the Discord, you'll see this discussion. We were talking about black and white versus colorized, and I watched both versions. As everyone, I say it every time. I watch these movies at least twice every time that we're doing a thing.
Right. Yeah, and this is kind of something they did with like It's a Wonderful Life too, where they experimented showing it in color as well. And I know a lot of people have pushback on it, but as having seen both of them, Matt, what is your thought on the difference?
Okay, so I think that both versions have their strengths. I think with A Wonderful Life, you don't get much extra out of having in color. In fact, it's kind of off-putting if you've seen the movie before. Right. I will say that with Bucket of Blood, they both have their pros and cons, and I think that either version really works for this. Because things like A Wonderful Life, I'm one of those people who's like, why would you colorize it? But I also, if I think logically, it's like, I don't get mad when they show Mad Max Fury Road in black and white or Logan in black and white. Like, why do I have to get angry about them colorizing a black and white movie? Those are all studio decisions. None of those are really artist decisions, unless sometimes they are. Like Zack Snyder's Justice League is probably the black and white version is probably a Zack Snyder choice.
Or like Guillermo del Toro with Nightmare Alley, he wanted to make it black and white. The studio said let's do it in color, but he still shot it in a way to where when they did do the transfer to black and white, all the shadowing and cinematography was designed so it could work in both ways, which I think is actually a cool strength of that.
Actually, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, whereas some of these movies, it's like it doesn't feel like they had both in mind when they were filming it. It seems like the studio just put a filter over it. Whereas some movies, though, I think can work both ways. Yeah.
Some can work both ways. And that's the thing. It's like, I don't think you need to mess with stuff all the time. And I don't think that they should go in and colorize a bunch of things. I think that if it benefits the movie, it makes sense. And in this movie, I think there are some benefits to the colorization. There are also some benefits to keeping it black and white. So I've got 3 bullet points each. I could have kind of gone on a little bit longer, but I've just got 3 bullet points each. Black and white feels more authentic. When you're watching it, you can tell that it's meant to be in black and white. And that definitely feels more authentic. The shadows work much better in black and white, which I think is a big part of the ambiance of this movie, which is part of how it makes it feel more authentic. So those 2 things are the big things. There's another thing that's kind of tied into another thing here, which is that so I'm going to leave one of the black and white things until after I've done the colorized. So on colorized, the Chad was right that there is a thing about the blood that does make it better in color with this one, and that is because when he uses that frying pan to smack him, when it comes back in black and white, you can tell it's blood, it's black, but it's like black, and you could tell that's supposed to be blood. When he pulls it back in the color version, and just everything else is kind of drab, and there's just this bright red on the thing, it's like instantly. Oh, that's cool. Really sells what just happened. Like you're just like, oh, he's just murdered a man, which both do that, but this one is like there's just this thing. It's like pop red all of a sudden, and that I think that really works. I also think that having color is a benefit to a movie about artists because there's art all over the walls and stuff like that. I think that you can show off your art a little. They were able to show off the art a little bit more in color. This is a part that it's both a pro and a con on the same thing. In black and white, it's unclear if the statues are wearing clothes or if they are made or if they're covered in clay like the rest of them, because it's just you can't really tell the difference between the thing. In color, you can tell that it is clay. Like he's cut, like it's completely clay, and it's not. He hasn't put clothes over a mannequin, which is kind of when I was watching Black and White, I wasn't sure if he was doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But in color, the clay looks extremely flat. It's just tan, and it becomes far more obvious that this is probably not very good art. The design is good, but something like there's not a lot of texture there. Like you can really tell that part. So I would say both things have their pros and cons. I think both versions of it work really well. So this is one of those situations. It's not like It's a Wonderful Life where I will tell you always watch black and white.
Right. Having only seen black and white, I'm glad I saw it that way first, and only because I do think the statues is like the main point where if those do not look convincing and don't look like, like they could be well-regarded art amongst these characters, you lose the whole you lose the whole thing, because it's all centered around how good these statues and how authentic and scary and raw and natural they are while still being art. And I think just the black and white hides a lot of the cracks and creases and stuff.
I agree with that. I will say
helpful.
that it does still convey horror and rawness in the thing. It's just there's just you can tell the texture and the color, like
the illusion is less there. But we the audience know what it is anyway, so it doesn't fool us. It's more so like, do the characters in the movie believe it more or less in black and white or color? But we the audience know exactly what's going on, so it doesn't really matter to us. And I actually think the designs of the sculptures are really cool regardless. I think for a movie about art, the art is at least interesting. Production design, especially in 5 days, the fact that they were able to like scrounge up anything, and that's kind of like a joke they make in the film. They're like, do you have enough clay? And he's like, yeah, I have enough clay. And the whole joke is that because he only covers the outside, he doesn't have to build the interior. But the whole also joke is that they only have 5 days to shoot, so there's a good chance, and I don't know if any behind the scenes, if they actually built sculptures or if they actually had actors covered in this clay-like makeup sitting.
It was mannequins. They covered mannequins in clay.
Gotcha. But that's still like cool. And again, it's really cool to like kind of think about the 5 days of it all, like how they're able to get all this done in such a short period of time. And a lot of it is conveyed through just interesting ways that he decides to frame the camera and like you said, the lighting and shadow and what is shown versus what is not, to build that illusion. I think of like the Saw scene with cutting the guy's head off, exactly when they decide to cut away versus cut to versus cut away, and kind of when they decide to end the scene and then proceed to the next one to reveal what happened, by having the guy run through the newspaper and be like, some man saw it in half. Like you can get the full picture without having to see the full picture, which I like. I think that's just a really smart editing tactic and cinematography, use of cinematography. If
I agree. Hey, which statue is your favorite? Because I thought they were all really cool. So
I think the sitting statue is really cool because of the way her legs were. And it also, the whole thing is at that point in the movie, they're like, you should do a woman, you should make a woman, make it more graceful, more beauty. And I think there's a grace and beauty to her sitting so nice and poised, but having this look of terror on her face. I think it's a weird kind of haunting dichotomy between beauty and death that is more conveyed than like the guy with the split down the middle. Because it also is an unconventional way to kill someone with a frying pan, where she looks like she's gasping for air. It's just a more haunting image to me. So the seated statue, and then you have the cat. But the cat, trigger warning, there is some animal brutality here. But it is the fakest looking cat you've ever seen, to where it's never once convincing that they actually killed a cat on set. So it's reassuring. But there is some cat animal violence, but it is also necessary for the plot, and they don't try to make it seem like it's a good thing. So, but fair warning, I know there's a lot of people who watch this, myself included, who are very triggered by animal cruelty. So just fair warning. But it is the most B-movie schlocky cat you've ever seen. So I hope you realize it's a puppet when it happens. And the way it happens, you don't see the death. You see the aftermath. You see the corpse, which can also be icky, but just trigger warning. I forgot to say at the top of the episode.
I think it's handled well for the thing. Yeah, as well as you can do it on that. I agree with you on the stat on the woman. I think that she's probably the best, most haunting. There's something about the murdered man that I really like with the split down his head. Like I understand why the cat, not so much. Murdered man, I understand why they dug it. Like the cat was fine, but it just looked like
too, just the face.
Yeah, just that expression. Like it's done really well, and you kind of. The movie kind of makes it seem like he's not, like, because he's covering him like that it's not maybe he's not really an artist, he's doing a thing, but there's certain artistic touches he has to put into that, like making sure that they're that they are making the faces and posing her like, yeah, she was posed like that when she died, but she doesn't stay like that. He has to make sure that she's posed like that. Like there's certain artistic touches that I think he has to make. So there is an artistry in there, even if he is taking shortcuts and murder with it, which I think it's interesting. As I'm watching the movie for the first time, I'm like, okay, so the cat was an accident. The cop was basically self-defense. Like he didn't know what to do and he freaked out. It's not until he lures the woman to his house that's the first time it's like, okay, so he's doing evil things.
Right. It's almost, so the premise, if you didn't go and watch it like we asked you to, just kidding. Some people don't have that extra hour, but if you don't really know the premise, is basically guy accidentally kills a cat, decides instead of fessing up to it, he decides to cover it in clay and basically sell it as an art piece, gets a lot of raves for it. As Matt said, there's self-defense. He has to fend off someone with a frying pan, kills him, does that as well, covers him in clay. And then, he starts to realize that, oh, the art is attracting people and people are attracted to him now, and there's attention, and he's realizing what he can do by basically providing these real human sculptures. It's kind of like a House of Wax thing, if you ever seen that. Like the idea that, oh, they're not really sculptures, they're dead bodies covered in clay. So that is kind of your whole premise, and I think it's very fascinating because like you look at something like Sweeney Todd, where from the get-go, and we do get backstory as the musical goes on, or the film, if you will, but I do think there's something to be said about, like, from the very first moment, he is a demon barber of Fleet Street. He kills people who go to get their haircut and then they get turned into meat pies. Here, you see that arc. You see the guy who doesn't fit in, struggles, feels remorse for this cat. He's very sad. She was going to make you halibut tomorrow. Like, it's a sad, fucked up line. And then you start to see how it kind of consumes him. And I think that's kind of where the most interesting juiciness of the themes of the story come in, because you see how he kind of lets this kind of greed and wealth and affection and attention kind of wash over him and turn him into essentially a sociopath, psychopath killer, which is really interesting. Serial killer, which I think is just a really fascinating arc that I didn't expect going in. I didn't really know what the movie was. I didn't try to look it up, and I was really enjoying the ride of it all. But I definitely got the Sweeney Todd comparison. I was like, oh, this reminds me of Sweeney Todd. This actually reminds me of Little Shop of Horrors as well. Kind of the idea of like, oh, very innocent kid ends up then kind of snowballing into something more demonic as it goes, that he's doing, that is just totally, not forgivable. But we still oddly feel empathy for him, which is also the weird part that is masterfully done in this thing.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because you know what he's doing is wrong, and you don't. You do feel empathy for him throughout, because you understand what he just wants to be accepted. He wants to be accepted within his community, and he hasn't gotten that. And now he's finally getting that, and so it's a really good, it's masterfully, as you said, that like the way that he keeps him doing the evil things, the things that are, because like I said before, like the first two don't feel evil, they feel like circumstance, and what he does with them is questionable, it's wrong. But it's not like evil. But then when he lures this girl to his house to do that, there's a you realize, okay, he has gone too far now, but you still feel for him because he's still that guy. He's that guy. He's the person you are if you've ever felt lonely or you've ever felt excluded or anything like that. Like, so I really think that is all. I also think that's really, really well done. Okay, so I want real quick. I'd like to talk about the character Dick Miller plays in this, which is Walter Paisley.
Right.
Dick Miller has played Walter Paisley, or a character named Walter Paisley, 8 times.
Whoa, I didn't know this.
Yeah.
Okay.
First time was in this. This was the first time he played Walter Paisley. And then after that, Corman produced a movie but didn't direct it, called Hollywood Boulevard, where he played a character named Walter Paisley. The first non-Corman thing that he did, where he was called Walter Paisley, although Roger Corman does have a cameo in this movie, but he doesn't produce or anything like that, is Joe Dante's The Howling.
Okay.
He plays a character named Walter Corman. Then he played Walter Paisley in the Twilight Zone movie, the movie version, the Twilight Zone movie. Then in Chopping Mall, which is produced by Julie Corman, Roger's wife.
Gotcha.
And then he played the same character, Officer Walt Paisley, in both 1986's Night of the Creeps and 1994's made-for-TV remake of Shake, Rattle, and Rock.
Wow.
Which is a Corman movie, the original. And then finally in 2019, his last credit, because it was released posthumously, he's in a movie called Hanukkah, where he plays Rabbi Walter Paisley.
That's incredible. And did he play any other roles besides Walter Paisley? Like any other characters? I wonder. Or it was like he's in a lot of stuff, right?
He's in a lot of stuff. He's in a lot of Corman stuff. He just he doesn't always play Walter Paisley. But
I thought that would have been even funnier if he didn't do anything else. Like that was his only.
Right.
Okay, I see. He's worked for James Cameron, Martin Scorsese. Okay, he's been in a lot. Yeah.
And here's the thing, like there's some characters that I know don't have names. Like in Terminator, he plays the gun salesman.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
We can say that's we can call that Walter Paisley.
Yeah,
don't
right.
know his name.
I mean, he's yeah. Of course, he's the rigger in the Wild Angels. We can call him Walter Paisley. He's a taxi driver in the Slams. We can call him. He plays taxi driver quite a bunch as well. That is so funny, Walter Paisley. I wonder if that's like a decision he made, or if it's like a common just joke. Do you know anything behind the gag of it, or just?
I don't really know anything about it. I know that he's commented on it, but it's not really like a. Here I've got the quote here. He said, "I've played Walter Paisley 5 times now, I think," which at the time was probably true, but it's not true anymore. Actually, it appears that's the only quote he said. But yeah,
there's nothing really about it. It's just kind of an in joke, which I think is fun. You know, like that's a cool little career thing.
Well, and the thing is, like the first one was Roger Corman directed and produced. The second was a Roger Corman produced movie. Joe Dante worked with Roger Corman, and that's why Roger Corman has a cameo in The Howling. So that is just a continuation of a Roger Corman.
It's kind of like how Spielberg uses Yoda in E.T. because he's best friends with George Lucas. It's like kind of that thing where it's like, you're gonna throw things into each other's films. It's fun. So yeah, I think that's
George Lucas uses E.T. in
Phantom Menace. That is true. That is very true. I forgot about that. Yeah, very uncanny. Yeah, that's so cool. He's so good in this, and I think it's I don't want to jump to superlatives, but I think reason the movie works as well as it does is because of him as well. Because you could have an actor like we saw with Teenage Caveman, like the performances weren't necessarily sublime, so like it didn't help us get as immersed into the film as we could have. But here, like I'm fully engaged with what he's doing, even if I don't agree with it. I want to see what is going to happen. I actually didn't know how it was going to end. I didn't necessarily know where it was going to lead to because I didn't know where his headspace was at. Is he going to keep going until he's too far gone and gets in trouble and gets caught for it? Is he going to do what he does, or is he going to somehow get away from it? And it was a really cool guessing game the entire time, and I think his performance really kept me intrigued. It's almost like the Walter White Breaking Bad thing of like you're watching this character spiral out of control, but you can't help but lean in and need to know what happens next, even though it's not going to end well no matter what. And I think that's the fascination behind this like anti-hero like character for sure.
Right. Yes, I completely agree. I think that he's perfect in this role, and going back and looking at a bunch of things that I've seen him in, which I knew about The Howling and Chopping Mall, that he played the same named character. Once I watched Chopping Mall, I had read about that. I didn't realize how many times he played that character, but I realized I've seen him in a lot of stuff, and his performance always feels honest, no matter how good or bad the movie is. He always feels authentic in the role. And I think that someone else would not. Robert Vaughn from Teenage Caveman, and we talked about it last time, how he was acting to the very back seats of the movie. Like that was his whole thing. I cannot, and I think he's a good actor. I don't think he could. I think Dick Miller could play the Teenage Caveman. Robert Vaughn could not play Walter Paisley.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
So like I think Robert Vaughn is a good actor. I just think that he, especially the way he played it, like could never have you would never have felt the insecurity in him. Like
Right, because it is a very introverted performance, because he struggles to connect, and this is his way of kind of making a name for himself, and it's kind of a sad thing. But it is something we see all too often, someone like clinging onto the attention and doing things that are in the poorest interest just to get people to notice them. And that's a sad truth about just kind of the art world at large as well, and just the way movies are made as well, and then just the idea of like we're only doing it for the buck and for the notoriety and to like get the top chart of the box office without thinking about the actual artistic merits and the responsibility that comes from making art and teaching a lesson. Art is meant to educate and inform, but also to make you feel and to entertain. But sometimes I feel like they only think about the feeling and entertainment without the actual morals of it. And we see that with a lot of irresponsible artists, and or just people in general taking their platforms and using it for a harmful means. And I think that's what this film essentially is in a nutshell, in a very small 65-minute nutshell. But it's really fascinating to look at like how people with their own self-esteem kind of make the worst choices possible, and how that ends up not benefiting them in the end, not benefiting anyone really,
Right. Yeah. No, I exactly 100%. I agree with that. So we kind of touched on it. I want to talk about the comedy, the horror comedy, because I think it's very, very well balanced. I think that and that a lot of the commentary or a lot of the comedy is satire. It's got the commentary going with it. Like it's definitely satirizing the beatnik, culture. It's satirizing the artistic community, like, and how, like you said at the top, like the trying to get that buck or get that, trying to selling out basically to get that money, or even the other side, which is the when people are just so up their ass about art, like that they basically bully this guy into what he's doing. Like there's a lot of satire in this movie, but my favorite little bits, and I'm going to talk about it here because one of our superlatives on Framewreck Redemption is favorite lines of dialogue, and I have a lot that I really liked, but my favorite lines in this movie are always the ones where he says something that implicates him as in the murder, and they take it as him being metaphorical about his art. So stuff like someone asks, "Why'd you put a knife in it?" Talking about the cat, and he's like, "I didn't mean to." Or when someone's like, "Why don't you go make another cat?" He says, "I don't have another." Stuff like that is just so it's so funny because it's just little and subtle, and it's probably not realistic. Like that's not a very smart person who reacts that way, but it's very funny and intelligent, and the satire in this is really, and I said this in my review too, it's whip smart. It's just so true, like real and biting, but also kind of you still have the camp and the silliness in this. I think the comedy in this works so well, but it doesn't overpower the horror element.
Absolutely.
which is there. And sometimes they're in the same scene, which is what you really want in a horror comedy. You want to have that horrific stuff while also allowing yourself to get a little chuckle in between the kind of horrific stuff. So I really love how that was.
And even with your line about like the cat, like I don't have another one. It's kind of like the idea of like, oh, well, you should make another sequel to this movie. And it's like, well, I it doesn't really lend itself to a sequel. Like I already made it. Like what, can't we just enjoy what I just made? Like, why do we have to be teasing the next one? And that's a very prevalent thing. Like I teased earlier, like 2024, like how many movies now are we seeing where we're like, oh, just a retread of the same things over and over again. There was a line that I really love too, where it was, I made them immortal and I can make you immortal too. It makes me think of like every time they resurrect a dead actor with CGI, and it's like, no, now we're immortalizing these characters so they can live forever. But I'm like, let them fucking rest, and I think that's another thing that can be taken from this movie too, of just like, just let them rest in peace. Like, what does that statement mean when you keep digging them up from their graves and literally, putting them on display without their consent? And that's exactly what this movie is. And I think, there's a lot of movies out there, even right now in theaters, that do that, and people are being like, it's not a big deal. But like, I think this movie shows that it is a big deal, and you're playing with people's lives and legacies in a way that you think is benefiting their legacies, but really isn't. It's really dirty and nasty. And I think that was just such a great line, because he's like, I made them immortal, I can make you immortal too. Like, thinking this is a gift, but in reality it's a curse, I think.
Right.
I love that line as well. I have another favorite line of dialogue that I'll say for later, but that was like one that just stuck with me in terms of, like, it's funny because he's like basically being like, oh, I can kill you so you can live forever. And it's like the total irony and comedy in that statement is so funny, because he's saying it to the love of his life, supposedly. And that's another thing that's really sad, is when he's like, you love me, you kissed me, and she's like, I was so struck with your art that I kissed you on the mouth. I didn't mean it like that. Like, and that's one of the saddest parts of it. But it's also like, dude, like, chill. Like, she doesn't love you like that. But I get it. Like, I understand why he in that moment would think that. And just the fact that he's like, I'll immortalize you by literally doing this to you and killing you and preserving you. It's like, it's like, I don't know about that.
And that's also part of the satire of the art community there, which is that, like, the idea that, and this is also something that we've dealt with since this movie came out, which is that, like, the idea that whatever is fine as long as you get good art out of it. Like, that you can abuse a person as long as we get good art out of it. Like, people forgive Kubrick for how he treated Shelley Duvall, just because The Shining is a masterpiece, but that doesn't excuse the way he treated Shelley Duvall. Like, that's kind of the idea that it's, I think it's satirizing there, which is that, like, anything for great art, but that should not be, like, we need great art, but we don't need it at the expense of people. And I think that is the thing that and I think that is a very good example of how Roger Corman works too. Like, there's a reason that Dick Miller worked with him so many times. There's a reason that Joe Dante worked with him and then put him in The Howling. Like, this is obviously a person who cares about the people he's working with and who cares about his product, but not at the expense of people. Which I think
and I think that says a lot about Roger Corman as a filmmaker too. Like, I'm not going to make what everyone else is making. I'm not going to try to stretch myself with a big budget and a big film. I'm going to make what I can for my resources, and it's going to be great in its own special way. I don't need to be them. I don't need to cater to, like, the masses. And I think that's why Roger Corman became such a cult hit of a director, with such a great personality in this world, this Framewreck world, because he never did kind of stoop that low when it came to making art. He always stayed true to himself. And I think that's why this movie is so good, and it is a masterpiece, because it is him kind of saying, I'm not going to be that artist. I'm going to do my own thing. And it's funny because Little Shop of Horrors is very similar to this film, but it still feels fresh and unique. And it doesn't feel like he's, necessarily borrowing everything from it. He's more taking, his ideas and just elaborating more on them. Which I think is important, that some people don't realize. You have directors right now remaking their own movies in the English language and making them worse. It's like, sorry, John Woo. But it's an interesting concept. And I love how, like, Roger Corman was never that. He was always about making something different. Even if it was bad, it was original and it was his own, and he had his mark on it. And that's better than anything that could be $1 million billion-dollar success.
I completely agree. I think it's a good point. And what's funny is that we've talked about some of the satire and some of the messaging, and a lot of it is really feels ahead of its time, like we talked about before. But even like the idea that a lot of the lessons here translate to how we look at it today with the blockbusters and stuff like that. But Corman himself said about this film, it wasn't a huge success, but I think we were ahead of our time, because The Raven, which is one of the Poe from his Poe cycle, which is a triumph, was far less funny and had a similar tone. He said it was far less funny. Maybe the film was too modest, filmed in 5 days on sets that came from a film about youth. Distributors didn't know what to make of the movie. That didn't belong, to make that movie didn't belong to any particular genre. They were always scared of comedy. So basically he's saying what we did was ahead of its time, he's saying we were ahead of our time, and then now they're making that kind of movie, and I'm making that kind of movie because he's talking about his own movie.
Yeah.
We're still making that kind of movie. It's not nearly as good, but far more popular.
Yeah, so fascinating. Yeah, I mean, God, you could spend hours just with this movie, and that's so crazy because it's only an hour long, and it is that thing you said earlier. It's not 2 acts of a 3-act movie. It is a full movie. You get the full arc. You get the full statement, and I think that's what's so brilliant about it too. It's like you don't need time to tell a great story. You know, you could tell a great story in 5 minutes. You could tell this movie in 5 minutes, probably. You know.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Oh yeah, definitely.
I'm just glad we got 65 of them. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, we obviously love this movie, and we could obviously talk about it for hours. But let's, unless you have any other big points you want to make, I'd like to get into the superlatives.
I think the superlatives will segue to any other points.
Okay, great. Okay, so favorite lines of dialogue. I talked about a couple of my favorites. You said you had another one that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, just one line that also stood out to me. It kind of also along the lines of the career analysis and self-reflection is the line, "It's hideous and eloquent," because I think that is Roger Corman to a T. I think his art is like, you know, it's maybe not the most pleasant to look at. It's very under budget, but it has something to say. So I just thought that was a really great line of dialogue where I'm like, if I have to encompass his career in a line, I think "It's hideous and it's eloquent" is like a perfect, mwah, you know, like I think that's just a great thing. Great statement, sentiment.
Yes, that I agree. That's very, very good. Some of my favorite lines, as I mentioned, were kind of misunderstandings that were just like really funny. But I also like kind of ones where he's being, it's hard to even explain, but ones like this where he after he kills Lou, he says, "I didn't mean to hurt you, Lou. But if you'd shot me, you'd be mopping up my blood now." Like there's like this sadness and like, but also like a little funny because he's talking to this dead person and he's talking about himself and just this, I don't know. There's a comedic sadness to this character that I really love, and a lot of his lines really display that. I also really love, and it might be a little cheesy, I don't know, but I really love the last line, which is, "I bet he would have called this the hanging man." Like it's very on the nose, but it feels like a classic final line to a movie, and I really and it is a classic.
Well, and it's like the sadness of like this man literally realized maybe he realized his faults. I hope he did, but like he realized there was no way out, so he's just gonna take the absolute worst way out, which is by killing himself. But then it's also like all they care about is, oh, what would they call this one? Like, oh, what art would this be? Like this, how much money would this make? It's like, no, that's not the point. And I think that's another great kind of end to show what these characters' attitudes are and their very wrong-minded notion about it. Yeah, which is funny because I didn't love, and when we talk about like the scene that we feel like could have been improved, I thought about putting the ending down because I just didn't love how it just kind of ended so quick and so abruptly. That last line is really great for what it does. I almost thought of like a great way though, like that would just be the extra cherry on top is if those characters, because a lot of them are admittedly slime bags as well. They're not murderers, but they are like, you know, in it for the greed and the corporate greed. I would love if the guy who ran the art studio at the end, we get a second little epilogue where like he is now being sold at like as a sculpture of him. Like I think that would have been like one of those crazy like, oh shit, and the cycle just continues. It didn't matter that it was this guy. People are always just going to exploit death for art. And I think that would have been like a really wild ending. So I almost wish they had like kind of just extended it one beat further. Or I was expecting when they opened the door for him to be covered in wax. So I was like, there's no way. How do you do that? But like I expected something to come back around where he ends up in a wax sculpture. It just seemed like the poetic ending, which we didn't get.
Right.
It's fine. But I just
that's actually because so usually on a Framewreck Redemption, instead of a train wreck moment, we talk about something that they're right about, like that the detractors are correct about. Because this film isn't like full of detractors, so people don't really think of it poorly. We decided to change that to what I would have changed. You know, what I'd change in the movie. Mine is actually the ending as well, because there are three different routes this could go. And one of them was the same exact thing that you said, which is that they end up selling him but in order for that to have happened, I was thinking when they come in and the man is hanging, that he is completely covered in clay. And there is a question as to, if you just end it there, there's a question to, is that him or is that actually an original sculpture that he made? Like, that would be like the
It's almost
question
like
there. Like
the
that.
enemy, like the ending where it's like, what
Yeah.
what is exactly, is it really
Yes.
there? Is it not as a metaphor? Yeah, that'd be cool.
So that would it'd be like that. Or he like, yes, like he's covered in clay, and then they end up selling him at the end, like as a commentary on that. I would have loved that as well. There are several directions that could have gone. I just think that would have been cool. And it almost feels like they tried to do something like that, because the makeup on his face when he's doing that is very thick right there. And Dick Miller actually talked about it, how he was upset. He was disappointed with how low their budget was on this movie and how quickly they had to go through it. Like, and he even said like that, that ending would have been a lot better if we had had the time and budget to cover my face in clay like that. And I was like, oh, that was my thought. But
I think we all were thinking like, oh my god, he's gonna be, because they make the reveal. They're like, oh, they open the door and then they look, and it's like it's either gonna be him dead or him, in his own clay, But again, with budget restraints, I get why they ended it the way they ended it. But I think that would have been a really cool ending. I don't want them to remake this film, because I think it's so important to be set at the time it's made, and I think they have remade it actually. But I don't know if it's a good one. But I don't necessarily know if it needs one, but I would like to see a remake that at least maybe makes it like 75 minutes and just like adds a little extra at the end, and maybe like irons out a few little things. But I really don't think I'd change much, because I think it is so great. But for the ending we got, it's a great final line. But I do also think there could have been maybe a slightly more inspired ending. That might be it.
Right. No, I agree. And before we get back to the superlatives, since you've already mentioned remaking it, it was remade for television in 1995 under the same name, but it was also distributed under the title The Death Artist. Anthony Michael Hall played Walter Paisley in that movie. Justine Bateman played the love interest. I haven't seen that, but I probably will eventually. There was a musical production of Bucket of Blood.
Looking at that now, yeah, wow, that sounds cool.
It was apparently it only ran from September 26th to October 31st, 2009. But apparently, it got exceptional reviews.
Listen, bring it to Off Broadway. I'll help produce it.
Well,
I would love that.
In March 2023, it premiered at La Miranda Theater, and they premiered an adaptation of Bucket of Blood entitled "Did You See What Walter Paisley Did Today?" So I don't know much about that, but there's another one as of I'd read it somewhere. I don't know if it was right here. I saw somewhere that someone. Oh, here. Another musical adaptation is currently in development, retitled Beatsville, featuring book by Glenn Slater and music and lyrics by Wendy Wilf.
All right, there you go.
So there's apparently another musical adaptation being.
It's funny because Glenn Slater, like his whole thing is like adaptations. He worked with Andrew Lloyd Webber on, I think, School of Rock, and then he also did the Sister Act musical.
Sister Act, I knew that he did that.
That's very cool. I think this would be a really cool stage play or musical. Also because I know we talked about how it's like a cheapness element, but the way the set is so minimal, you really can kind of make it a play or a musical, because all you need is his apartment, the art gallery area, and then like that one scene where he's outside with the saw, I guess, and then like outside of his friends, like there's a few exterior shots that you could easily do, just like spotlights on the side of a stage or something, or you could even do it off stage. Like you really only need two main sets, which is why I think it could be cool. And I think you could even have them coexist, like have them both on stage the whole time. Like when he leaves the apartment and like there's the arm hanging down and like he goes to the play. Yeah, I don't know. I think it could be a really cool stage version. So I need to check those out. We obviously are far from La Mirada Theater in California, but I would love to see if there's like a bootleg version of it, because I would love to watch it, or maybe a pro shop version. Wow, I really, that'd be really cool. I'm just like looking at who was in that TV movie too, because it was like David Cross and Jennifer Coolidge. Will Ferrell is in it.
Ferrell,
oh my god, yeah, I need to watch this. Maybe we'll do that as a little aside one day. I think there isn't much I'd change, but I think the ending is the one thing that I think could have been at least fuller thought out. But That's
I
better.
agree. I'm with you on that.
Mm.
Okay, so best actor. And I think we both. I imagine we both have the same one.
I
We both
mean,
talked about it at length.
I mean,
It's Dick Miller, right? Like
it's the
that's
Dick. Yeah,
obviously.
of course. Yeah, of course. Dick Miller, of course. I mean, it
Uh,
is one of the great performances I've seen.
it's so good. It's so good.
Mhm.
You know, other people are good. Like I don't feel like there was a bad performance, but
Oh,
a
they're all
lot
good.
of the art people were caricature-y. Like that was
Mhm.
their whole thing because it's a satire. So
Intentional. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, exactly. They weren't given a lot of room to work because their whole job was to stick their nose in the air and either stick their nose in the air and talk like they're better than everyone, or just be so fucking high that they couldn't think straight. Like those are the
Yeah.
two options in there. I do think that the other leads, like they're like four, or I would say there are 3 or 4 like main leads.
Mhm.
Barbara Morris, is that how you say her name? Yeah,
Yeah.
Barbara Morris, who played Claire, was really good. I thought she
Yeah.
was excellent. She was very believable.
Mhm.
I could see why he would fall in love with her because I fell in love with her. Like
Yeah.
that's. I think she was incredible. And the guy who played Leonard was really good. Like he did his role.
Anthony Carbone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Anthony Carbone. Yes.
Mhm.
I will say that Lou, the guy who played Lou, Bert Convey, he was not my favorite. I wouldn't say he was worst. I wouldn't give him a worst actor or anything like that.
Mhm.
And it was. I don't think it was his fault either. I just didn't buy Policeman from him. It just didn't.
Mhm.
It didn't click with me. The character he's playing.
Mhm.
I did think it was funny that he came in and just ate some of the heroin and then
Yeah, to see if it was actually real or not. He just took the drug.
yeah.
And then like he like pulls out his gun and like I get it for the dramatic effect. You need him to like just not shoot, but it was also weird that it was like he was just like standing there with the gun. I'm like, that guy shouldn't have been able to be taken out by a frying pan. Like,
Right.
logistically,
He was holding a gun. Yeah,
logistically.
exactly.
But yeah.
So yeah, I think
Dick Miller.
everybody else in there was good, and they did their work and they did their job.
Yeah.
It's just Dick Miller was just he was so good and really sold the premise of the movie. It would not have worked without his
I agree.
performance.
Mhm.
But okay, and you agree that that's the same for you. We're both on the Dick Miller train.
Yes, we are.
Okay, best scene. For me, and I mentioned it earlier, and it's a scene that combines the horror and comedy together really well, which is the blood dripping scene right after he kills Lou.
Mm-hmm.
So he kills Lou. His landlady or whoever that lady is comes over.
Who is also the cat owner, correct? And we never really
she owns the
resolved
cat.
that, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
good.
She owns the cat because she has the halibut for him.
Yes.
If you see him, tell him I have halibut for him. Tell him he's a cat.
Yeah. Excuse me, sir.
But so she comes over, and then there's just like this tense situation where she's looking around, and you, as the audience member, don't know where the body is, especially because he's just draped that thing over there, and she's about to look under the thing, and there is some tension there, and there's just like he's just murdered someone. He should be caught. You should want him to be caught, but you don't want him to. So there's this tension here, and behind him, an arm falls down into frame, and he's like, "Oh God," which does make leading the question: why? How does he get him up there? How does he do it without dropping the frying pan? Because he throws the frying pan right before he answers the door.
Yeah, and
So
I don't really know the passage of time, exactly how much time passed, because it feels like it was really immediate. Like it felt like he was screaming like, "Don't shoot me, don't shoot me, don't shoot me." Whack. Excuse me, sir. I hear something. Like it was very quick that I'm like, how did he get him up there? But again, that's kind of like I guess that's where you could say it's like very schlocky B movie. But
exactly. And this is kind of where the comedy of it comes in, while there's also tension. So the arm falls down, and he's like, "Oh God!" And then suddenly the blood starts dripping, and that's where the titular bucket of blood comes in. He puts the pot under the blood to catch it. But then like behind him, while they're finishing that, you just see the stream of blood falling while he's trying to get her out the door. I just really liked that scene a lot. It was funny. It did the horror and the comedy both really, really well. It was very good.
Yeah, I kind of alluded to mine earlier, where it's the whole like sequence from the sawing of the head into the
Mhm.
reveal of it. Because what I really
Mhm.
liked is that you don't. I think a cheaper film, well, not cheaper because that's a bad choice of words because it's as cheap as could
A
be, but
lesser film.
a lesser film, one that went for the cheaper joke, I should say, would be like,
Mhm.
you see the head come off and then he takes it and whatever. But the thing is, you don't exactly see any carnage, and then later on, he's at the door of his friend, and his friend opens the door and he's got this box, and you know exactly what's in the box. And it's hilarious because then the paper boy is like, "Did you see the man saw it in half? Did you see the man saw it in half?" It's the perfect like a blend of irony where the guy is like totally knows what's going on, and then he pulls out the head and then he says, "Put that down," and he like gently places it on the side, kind of like under the stairs, like on its side. I just thought that was a really great moment. Again, kind of the comedy thing of like, we the audience know everything. He knows everything. He's trying to hide everything. He doesn't know anything, but is piecing it together. And I just love the kind of culmination of that, watching the information kind of come about in a very authentic, interesting way, as opposed to like someone catches him taking the head, or he takes the full body, or it's the added bonus of he only took the head. He made the clay head. So what's going around telling people there's a man who's literally got his head sawn off, and then he's at his buddy's buddy's door with the head box. I just think it's a great
Mhm.
like bit of visual humor as well. So
Yeah,
um,
I
love
agree.
that
That's a
in the
great
box.
scene.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, that is all our superlatives for this. Let's talk about the legacy, which I kind of talked about it before, but we're going to talk about how it was received. It is in a retrospective review, Sight and Sound referred to it as Corman's best work, which so far I agree with.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm going to be watching everything he made for the future, but that's a tease. You don't know anything about that yet. It was Corman's best work. They said it was a hilarious dialogue and a finale reminiscent of Fitz Lang's M, which it's been on my watch list for so long and I haven't seen it, so I'm going to just try to forget about that. But
nice.
and that his low budget comedy horror pick works both as a satire at the expense of the Beat Generation and as a trenchant little allegory about New York art world in general.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Sight and Sound. Corman later said, I already talked about this, how Corman said basically that we did the same thing in The Raven and it wasn't as good, but was way more popular. Monthly Film Bulletin does mention here, said that the horror ultimately becomes rather too explicit. The macabre satire on beatniks teenage horror films has some particularly adroit dialogue and tragicomic situations, but they do praise. So they don't love it as much as we do, but they do praise Dick Miller, who gives a performance of sustained poignancy as a half-wit hero, which I agree with. And we talked about the adaptations, which I would normally talk about in the legacy section as well. No, that's good. I'm glad. Listen, I'm going to talk about these whenever they come up, just because it helps with the conversation. And we talked about it being colorized. So so that is the legacy. The legacy right now is we freaking really love this movie.
Yeah, go watch it, especially with Halloween coming up in a month or two. Or 2 months, I guess. Yeah, because it's at the end of the month. But October's coming in 2 months. Watch this as part of your little marathons, because I think it's fun. It's short. It's sweet. If you have a night where you're like, I'm so tired, I need to go to bed, I need to watch something quick. Watch a Corman film, because they're all very short. But like this one especially, I think this one is a real treat. And just kept me guessing till the end, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
so
really, really great. We don't need to talk about Mount Trashmore because it's a redemption, so it's of course not going to make it.
Redeemed. Yeah,
it's been redeemed. But let's talk about next month, because next month is a crossover extravaganza, but this time not with Chad, who we normally do our crossovers with. This time, and what you're gonna have to remind me what we called it. I forgot.
I have no memory of what am I saying? I have no memory of what we were going to call it, but a marvelous frame wreck, maybe. It might have been as simple as that. But we're doing a crossover with Marvelous Movie Mondays is what we're doing. So Kelsey and Matt will be guesting on each other's shows. I'm on both those shows, so I will be, I guess, the eternal guest. But Matt is going to come on Marvelous Movie Mondays. Kelsey and I have been doing like the first Avenger Files, where we're going through all the old Marvel movies that before like the MCU started. And we're going in order, but we're going to kind of skip to one film that really just fits the frame wreck mold really well, which is Howard the Duck. So Matt will be on to talk about about Howard the Duck with Kelsey and I. And then we're going to have Kelsey on here because we've already done a review for this film on our channel on Marvel's Movie Mondays. But we wanted to talk about it specifically in the Framewreck lens of, is it so bad it's good, or is it just bad, which is Madam Web, which we'll have Kelsey on here to talk about.
Which
so
I haven't seen, so I'm very excited.
Yet.
I'm excited for the future and what we're headed towards.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you guys for watching. You can find us at the socials down below, and stay tuned for that. It'll be a fun crossover event. We're not sure what's going to come first, but you will expect to see the Marvel's Movie Mondays episode with Howard the Duck on a Monday. Framewreck doesn't have to be on a Monday, but we might still release on a Monday. We'll see. But thank you guys so much for watching, and keep redeeming things. Bye.
What a story, Mark.